continue now at the top of Daf Chesed Aleph Mesechet Shekalim. This is Shekalim Daf 8a. The Gemara says, Tamon Taninan over there. We learned this is in Mesechet Rosh Hashanah. Rabbi Meir says, Be'echod be'elul Rosh Hashanah l'maiser behema. On the first of Elul is Rosh Hashanah for maiser behema. If you have animals born before the first of Elul and then other animals that are born after the first of Elul, those do not join together for the purposes of the halach of maiser behema. Rabbi Lazar of Rabbi Shimon Omer, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon say, Be'echod b'tishrei. It's not the first of Elul, it's actually the first of Tishrei. And Ben Azai Omer, Ben Azai says, Ho'elulim misasrin b'fnei atzman. All animals that are born in Elul, they have to be meiser together on their own. In other words, Ben Azai says it's a suffix. He doesn't know if the Rosh Hashanah of Meiser Behim is the first of Elul, or if it is the first of Tishrei, and therefore everything that is born in the month of Elul, between the first of Elul and the first of Tishrei, it has to be treated like a suffix. We don't know if it goes for the year before, or for the following year. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Chuna says, Talmud Rabbi Meir, the reason of Rabbi Meir is as follows, Adkan hein mesamtzos leiled min hayeshanos. Mikan v'elach hein maschilos leiled min hachadoshes. Basically, what Rav Chuna is saying is it really goes by when the animal becomes pregnant. So according to Rabbi Meir, any animal that gives birth, let's say, before the first of Elul, so we know that that animal became pregnant before the first of Nisan, and it really goes by Nisan, which is the first of the months. So in that case, it's going to be for the previous year. But any animal that gave birth after the first of Elul, then we know the pregnancy took place after the first of Nisan, and that's why it's going to be in this particular year. Gemara continues, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Bon b'shem Rav Chona. Rabbi Yossi bar Rav Bon says in the name of Rav Chona, some people change Chona here in both cases to Huna, in the name of Rav Huna. Time of the Rabbi Lazar of Rabbi Shimon, the reason for Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon is as follows. The pasuk says, Love shukarim hatzon. Love shukarim hatzon is a reference to the pregnancy of the animal. Elo habechiros, those are the ones that become pregnant early, meaning in the month of Adar. V'hamokim yatzvu bar elo hafelos. Hamokim yatzvu bar, that's a reference to the animals who become pregnant in the month of Nisan. Yisroa af yashiru, meaning elu ve'elu nichnosim ladir lesasir. That when the pasuk says Yisroa af yashiru, that means to say that both those that became pregnant in the month of Adar, those that became pregnant in the month of Nisan should be together. Meaning Rosh Chodesh Nisan is not going to be the point in time when we say the difference between the previous year and the following year, and therefore it goes all the way up to the month of Iyar. Any animal that became pregnant before the month of Iyar, those are all considered in the same year, and that's why Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon say Echad b'Tishrei. As long as the birth was before the first of Tishrei, we can assume that then the pregnancy was before the first of Iyar, and all of those are going to be Meiser Behema together. And Omar Ben Azai, and then Ben Azai says, Hoel ve'elu amrim kach, ve'elu amrim kach, since Rabbi Meir has one opinion, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon have a different opinion, so therefore Yehuha elulim misasrin b'fnei atzman. Therefore, all of those that are born in Elul have to have Meiser Behema on their own. We don't know whether they go with the previous year or the following year. The Gemara says, Haketzad, how so? No ladlo hey ba'av. They change it from behei ba'av to hey ba'av. Let's say 5 animals are born for the person in Av. The hey ba'elul, 5 animals born in Elul. The hey b'tishrei, and there are 5 animals born in Tishrei. So those are not mitzdarif, ain mitzdarfin. They're not going to be mitzdarif. You actually don't have, in this situation, 10 animals born in one period. No ladlo hey b'tishrei v'hei ba'av. Now, however, let's say 5 are born in Tishrei, and then in the following Av, so it's all part of 1 year, you have another 5 that are born, harei elu mitzdarfin, then you have 10 animals, and then you're going to have to take off meiser behema. The Gemara says, Uven Azai machriya al divrei talmidov. Would Ben Azai come along and he'd be a machriya? He'd say, since these say this and these say that, therefore we're going to do a middle opinion, but these are his talmidim. In other words, Ben Azai is the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lazar of Shimon. What's going on over here? That Ben Azai, who's the Rebbe, is being machriya on his students. That's a very strange thing. So also Rabbi Yirmiyah of Rav Meisha b'shem Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Rav Yirmiyah and Rav Meisha in the name of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, they came along and they said, Shekei nechliku aleh avos ha'olam. It's not true that this machlokus is first between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Lazar of Shimon. The same exact machlokus occurred even with the earlier generations, with what we call the avos ha'olam. Uman ninu avos ha'olam. Who are we referring to when we say avos ha'olam? Who are these tanoim? Taner Rav Yonah, Kumei Rav Yirmiyah, Rav Yonah taught in front of Rav Yirmiyah, Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva had this exact same machlokus, and Ben Azai can be a machriya. He can take a middle position, so to speak, between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara says, Zosomeris Ben Azai chaver v'talmud hoyed Rabbi Akiva. This shows that Ben Azai was not just a student of Rabbi Akiva, he was also a chaver, he was also considered a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva. Because in Tamar Rabbi, because if you're going to say that Rabbi Akiva was his Rebbe, Isbar no, Shomer l'Rabbi, Hol, Velu, Amru Kach, Velu, Amru Kach, Would a student say to his Rebbe, since this one says this and this one says that? That's not how someone would talk to a Rebbe. So it must be Rabbi Akiva was like a chaver. Rabbi Avon b'shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak shama lo min hada. Rabbi Avon, in the name of Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak, he understood that Ben Azai was considered a contemporary Rabbi Akiva from the following line and statement that Ben Azai made. Amar le Ben Azai. Ben Azai said again to Rabbi Akiva, he said, Ala chalukin anu mitztarim, we're troubled over the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Ela shabas la'achlok aleinu as hashav, and now you, Rabbi Akiva, want to come along and say that areas where we thought Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree, they argue there as well. That's what you want to say. So that was a line that Ben Azai said to Rabbi Akiva. So you see from that line, Zos Omeres Ben Azai Chaver v'Talmud Havel Rabbi Akiva. You see from the way he speaks to Rabbi Akiva that he's not only a student, but also considered a Chaver, a contemporary of Rabbi Akiva, because in Tamar Rabbe, if it was his Rabbi, if Rabbi Akiva was Ben Azai's Rabbi, is Barnosh, Amar LeRabbe, Ela Shabbos Lachlok Aleinu Es Hashavin, would somebody say to his Rebbe, you're coming and making a machlokas where there was an agreement, you wouldn't speak that way to your Rebbe. Therefore, you see that Ben Azai was considered a chaver of Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara continues at the two dots, Tamon, Taninan, we learned over there in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah in Bechoros. The Mishnah says, Kol hanu lodin me'echad b'tishrei ad chav tes be'elul, any animal that's born from the 1st of Tishrei till the 29th of Elul throughout that whole year, harei elu mitzdarfen, that's all considered the same year. They all join together in terms of the halachas of Meiser Behema. This follows the opinion that Echad B'Tishrei is the Rosh Hashanah for Meiser Behema, like the opinion of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon before. Chamisha Lifnei Rosh Hashanah, Vehela Achar Rosh Hashanah. Let's say you have 5 born before Rosh Hashanah, and then 5 are born after Rosh Hashanah. Ein Mitzdaref, and they're not Mitzdaref. Hey Lifnei HaGoren, Vehela Achar HaGoren. Now 5 are born before the Goren, and 5 after the Goren. That's a reference to a previous line in that Mishnah, talking about the different granos for Meiser Behema, which is basically right before each of the holidays when you're actually supposed to do the process of taking off the Meiser Behema. So if you have some born, 5 born before the Goren, 5 after the Goren, that's irrelevant. Harei Mitzdarfen, those 5 and 5 are still join together. The Goren has to do with when you actually have to take off the Meiser, when you have to separate the Meiser, but it's not Koveya in terms of which group of animals it is a part of. Amar Rabbi Yossi says, Hado Meris, this shows Meiser Behema, that when it comes to Meiser Behema, lo asu oso lo kechanot v'lo keshlish, we don't treat it like the chanot, meaning like the blossoming, when it comes to Meiser that we have when it comes to produce. So sometimes we follow the blossoming of the produce, and also we don't follow those areas of halach in produce when we wait for it to grow a third of its growth, meaning Meiser Behema doesn't follow any of these rules. And Rabbi Yosef explains why it's not following the rules. Because in Tamer Kachanot, if you followed by animals the, so to speak, blossoming of the animal, so listening kol ha-me'ubarim me'echad b'tishrei ad esrim b'tisha b'elul, then it would go by when the animal becomes pregnant. In any situation where the animal became pregnant from the 1st of Tishrei until the 29th of Elul, it should go by pregnancy. That would be the equivalent of the blossoming when it comes to produce. And in Tamar Kishlish, and if you're going to say we follow what happens by produce when it grows a third, meaning basically reaches its maturity, so then, lisni kol hanoladim ad esrim ushnayim be'elul. It should only be until the 22nd of Elul. The idea over here is an animal is only considered to reach maturity when it's 8 days old, when it's roy, when it's fit to be a carbon. So anything born the 23rd of Elul is not going to be 8 days old until following Rosh Hashanah, and therefore it should be part of the next year. But here we're going all the way to the 29th of Elul, so we're not following the shlish. We're not following when it's roy for Hakarava. So the Gemara answers, Rabbi Shammai b'shem Rabbi Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Shammai says in the name of Rabbi Beve, in the name of Rabbi Chia, Kishlish also osa. No, we really are treating the animals just like when the produce grows to a third, meaning when it reaches its kind of mature growth. However, Rabbi Shimon, but we're following Rabbi Shimon, the Rabbi Shimon, because Rabbi Shimon happens to say, Mechusar zman nichnas ladir lesaser. Rabbi Shimon happens to say that even an animal that is less than 8 days old, the shame meiser is already chal. It can already enter into the pen in order to go through the meiser process. The way they did the meiser process was they had all the animals go into a pen, and then they go out one at a time, and the 10th one was meiser. Rabbi Shimon says that when it comes to that, it's not like other karbonos. Other karbonos, you have to wait till the 8th day. Here, you don't have to wait till the 8th day. So really, it has reached its maturity level in the sense that it's ready for hakrava, in terms of the din of Meiser Behema. So the Gemara says, Kam Rabbi Monim Rabbi Shammai. Rabbi Monim met up with Rabbi Shammai. Amar Le'at Amar Hadamilsa. He said to him, did you say this idea that the Mishnah over here is following the idea that you don't have to be 8 days old in terms of Meiser Behema? He says that can't be, because Tamon Taninan, we learned over there Ben Azai Omer, that Ben Azai says, we said just before that according to Ben Azai, everything born in Elul is its own category, and all those animals are together. They're not with the year before, and they're not with the year after. So the Gemara now darshans, Lo afilu nolad ad esrim v'tisha be'elul. So Rabbi Mona says, isn't this true even until the 29th of Elul? In other words, Ben Azai isn't saying until the 22nd of Elul. He's saying all the animals born in all of Elul. So now you're going to say the same thing for Ben Azai. Isloch Meimer, Ben Azai Reb Shimon v'lo Rabbanan. Are you saying that Ben Azai also follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that an animal can be less than 8 days old to be part of the, to go into the deer for Meiser Behema? He's not following the Rabbanan. That's dochik. Kimad Yat Amar Al Rabbanan Manichin L'Shana Haba Vein Misashin in Bnei Shnasan. No, you're not going to say that. Obviously, what we're going to say is that you can't actually do the Meiser process when they're less than 8 days old. You got to wait till it's 8 days old. But the point is, it still counts in the previous year's group of animals. It doesn't go in next year's animals, even though once the 8 days are up, it's already past Rosh Hashanah. We don't say they're part of the following year. You have to wait that long. You have to wait till they're 8 days old to actually separate the Meiser, to go through that process. It's not Chal. The Shem Meiser is not Chal when it's less than 8 days old, but it's still part of the previous year, so long as it's born before Rosh Hashanah. So, Kain Atamar Al Ben Azai Manichin Lagoran Haba. Vein Misashin and Bnei Elulim, you're going to say the exact same thing in all cases. You're going to say by Ben Azai, you can say over here as well, that it always follows the Rabbanan. Same thing with Ben Azai. And anything born in Elul is part of the Elul group. You just have to wait until it's 8 days old to actually go through the process of Meiser. So the same thing over here. You don't necessarily say that it follows Rabbi Shimon over here, and that it's Kishlish that we're following Shlish. Rather, no. We go by the time that it's actually born, but it's not actually roy to be part of Meiser. There's no Shem Meiser until it's actually 8 days old, not following Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Chia says, Zoso Meres, this proves, Yomim Shabachor Mechusers Man Bohen, Olin Lo L'Soch Shanaso. The halach is when it comes to a Bechor, when it comes to a firstborn animal, you're supposed to bring it as a carbon within the first year. And this shows that even the first 7 days, that counts for the year. In other words, you might think you have to wait till it's at least 8 days old. No, it's part of this year, even when it's under 8 days old. Amar Rabbi Mona, Amar Rabbi Yona, Abba Shama Lamin Hada. So Rabbi Mona said the name of Rabbi Yona Abba that you learn it from the following. Because the pasuk says, Kol ha-bechor asher yivolid v'gomer hazocher takdish. It says all bechor that is born, the males, you're going to make them holy, you're going to bring them as the kedusha of a bechor. Ha-keitzad, how so? Mishas leidaso atmona lo shana. In other words, you count the year from the time they are born. But therefore, the point is, by bechor also, the moment the animal is born, you have 1 year from that time in order to bring it as a bechor, as a carbon. You don't start the year count from day 8. You start it immediately from the first day that it is born. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, B'shalosh kupos shel shalosh soin. They had 3 boxes, and each box was 3 soin. So Torminas HaLishka, that's where they would take the money out of the Lishka. The Lishka was the chamber where they had the Machatzis HaShekel, and they would take 3 times a year, as we said, they would take money out of the Lishka, and they would put it in these boxes, and they would put it into these 3 boxes. The Chasav Alei and Aleph Beis Gimel. And on each of the boxes, the first one was written in Aleph, second one a Beis, the third one a Gimel, so you would identify which was the first, second, and third box. Rabbi Shmuel says, Yevonis Chasav Alei, and it wasn't written in Hebrew, it was written in Greek, Alpha, Beta, Gamma. It was written Alpha, Beta, Gamma. That's how they wrote, because they spoke in Greek. Ein hatorim nichnas lo bepargad chafas, v'lo beminol, v'lo besandal, v'lo betfilin, v'lo bekmiya. The person who takes the money from the lishka, he's not allowed to enter with a sewn-up hem, or with a shoe, with a sandal, with tefillin, with a kmiya, with an amulet, because the idea is all of these areas have, all of these parts of these garments have places where you can hide the money. We don't want people to suspect that the person stole the money from the lishka, so you can't enter with any of these articles of clothing or garments, because again, there might be a suspicion of thievery. Why? Shema yeyani v'yomru meyavan halishka hani. Maybe the person who's taking the money will become poor in the future. People will say he sinned, he stole money, that's why he became poor, it was a punishment. Or Shema yasher, maybe on the contrary, maybe this person will become wealthy. V'yomru mitrumas halishka hasher, people will say he must have stolen from the trumas halishka, that's how he became wealthy. The Mishnah finishes, Sha'adam tzarech lotzes yidei habrios, because a person needs that people shouldn't suspect the person. Kederech shetzarech lotzes yidei hamakom, just like God should not suspect the person. Shenamar, like the pasuk says, v'yisam nikiyim me'Hashem u'miyisrael, you have to be innocent, both from God and from Klal Yisrael, so people should have no suspicions that this person stole from the lishka. V'yomer, the pasuk also says, "Umatzalchein mesechel tov b'einei elokim v'adam." Again, you find favor in the eyes both of God and of man. And the Gemara says, "Tamon Taninan." We learned in a Mishnah over there. This is a Mishnah in Shabbos. Mefanin afilu dalid v'chamesh kupos. It says you're allowed to clear even 4 and 5 boxes on Shabbos. It's not a problem of doing work on Shabbos, of doing excessive tircha on Shabbos. So Reb Zeira Shol asked Reb Yoshia. Reb Zeira asked Reb Yoshia the following question: Kama hu shiuran shel kupos? What is the size of a box? It says 4 or 5 boxes, but how big is the box? Amar lei. So he said to him, we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ches Amud Beis.